I could see you.
Okay. Lloyd, can you see me?
No.
Lloyd, are you there? I think
Well, they were
Lloyd's
there a second
muted.
ago.
Yes.
Lloyd's muted. Yeah.
Hey, how are you?
Okay, now he's there. Yeah.
Did you get your second shot yet?
Okay.
Thank you.
Now Richard's muted.
Okay. No, I shouldn't be muted now.
You're
Absolutely.
good.
Okay, so we're good. So first of all, I want to welcome everybody to our, I believe this is our third session, the lottery, the man who would bring rain, and it's a very exciting venture that Rabbi Moshe and I are on because it gives both of us the opportunity to excel and to improve ourselves. Not that we are there, but that we're improving ourselves with what we really enjoy doing, and reading and writing poetry and writing. I've written so many articles on my website, on my blog, that it's a pleasure to continue my odyssey in discovering great literature to share with us during this month of cultural diversity. It's a month of February, and who do we celebrate in February? Who do we celebrate besides the birth and death of Moses on Adar 7?
We celebrate Esther and Mordecai.
Yes, we do. Okay, but I'm thinking more in terms of cultural, American culture. I want you to have that in the background as I basically summarize. What I've done here is chosen a short story which is incredibly rich in references to Judaica. There's so many. When Rabbi and I discussed over the weekend, I said, I need 2 or 3 sessions to cover all of the exciting references, connections that this story raises, beginning with the Garden of Eden and Eve, and going right through to Mashiach, the coming of the blessed Savior in times to come. But there's so many references here. So let me get started, okay? So Ben Okri is the author of this article, which appeared in the New Yorker about 2 weeks ago. I found it by pure luck, but it's more than luck, as I certainly believe. Ben is a native of Nigeria, born in 1959. He is a poet. He's a novelist. He has won, at the age of 32, the youngest person ever to win the Booker Award in fiction, which is the highest literary award that the UK and Ireland award in the English language. And so he won that in 1991 for a work of fiction, and he's the youngest. He also wrote a poem, which he dedicated to the Booker Award people. I have the poem in front of me. It is so beautiful. And being a lover of poetry, I'm quoting, this is about 40 lines. You can find it online. But he's celebrating a mind alone is sufficient for a world to be valid, to start an intelligent fire among the ice-cold certainties, to be brave in voice and to be vast in dreams, to be fearless and to give form to the world's buried screams. That's what we're screaming. The whole world is up in arms with COVID. To stare at horrors and give them narrative spaces. In other words, to use the creative process in order to belittle the virus, all of the tragedies, all of the magefot that we're surrounded with. Okay, so A Wrinkle in Time. I've divided, it's very short, only 2 pages in the New Yorker. I know you guys have 7 or 8 pages, but it's very short. 5 different parts. Part 1, I've got a problem. Part 2, he brings his problem to work, a small advertising firm. Part 3, he puts on a mask, the beginning of transformation. Part 4, transformation continues. Part 5, transformation is complete.
I don't have all that. I only have a page, just a little more than 1 page printed out.
Okay, so basically, what I've done is I've summarized it into 5 parts. Okay, and the first part, this man, we don't know his name, we don't know where he's living, but I can surmise it's probably London. He's walking on the street. Woman crosses the street when she sees him coming. Next day, he's in the underground. Underground refers to the subway in London. A woman sitting 3 empty seats from him, and she switches her hands. He sees something wrong with him. He's not quite sure what it is. He wants to discuss it with somebody, but he can't think of anyone. The guy he's lonely. He has no friends, it seems here. He's isolated. He realizes that in daylight, nobody pays attention to him in the street. But in the evening and dusk, people avoid him. The women cross immediately to the other side of the street. He experiments with different ways of walking, bow-legged, bandy-legged, walk sideways, and they continue to cross even to a greater degree. He rules out the fact that maybe because he's a male and he's scaring these women, but he notices a bow-legged man walking and encountering a woman, and they just pass each other. But when that woman comes to him, boom, she's going across the street. Okay, end of part 1. Part 2, he brings his problem to work. Working in a small advertising firm. Keep in mind that advertising firms have tended to be in the United States white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. They tend to be white, and they tend to exclude Catholics and Jews and other minorities. So he's working in a small ad firm. He confronts his co-workers and he says, have you noticed anything strange about me? You say, yeah, but they can't say why. And he becomes obsessed with the idea that something about him had changed. People who have avoided him, that they were responsible for that change. He's not sure how. Next, he hides from people at work. He fears them, that they are taking extraordinary pains to avoid him. So what he does, he turns his back on them and hides, and hinged, and they're puzzled. By now, I quote, he made himself, quote, as invisible as possible during the meetings. Very important. That's the theme right there. He turns into an invisible person, so to speak. So he's avoiding mirrors. This section culminates with people avoiding him in the streets, and he can't deal with the negation of being shunned, okay? He sometimes wished that he could become invisible so he could not have to endure the shame of seeing people flee from him. Okay, I have to get this in. I kept thinking as I typed this up this morning, the spies in Devarim, we appeared as grasshoppers in our own sight, Hagavim. And Eve in the Garden of Eden, covering her genitalia, cowering in shame, becoming invisible. And this is a theme that runs right through our Tanakh, okay? Part 3, he puts on a mask, okay? What I call the beginning of transformation. He's a sudden idea, if he wears a mask, he'd be free of anxieties. So he buys 7 different masks, and he tries to find one that's close as possible to the human face, okay? He puts them all on, chooses 5, wears them to the office. He is, quote unquote, balked by his colleagues. His boss calls him into the office. The boss gives him an ultimatum. Either you see someone or we fire you, okay? Because you're scaring everyone. Part 4, transformation. He notices women are no longer shunning him in the street. He goes back to the mask store, okay? And he's puzzled by what he sees, okay? And people are just not bothered by him in the street. He goes back to the owner and he says, what's happening here? All of a sudden, people are not scared of me. And the owner says, aha, now I understand what your problem is. I've got a mask especially for you. He said, for the first week, you must believe that the mask is your face, okay? Don't look at yourself in any mirror. He gets home, puts it on, feels comfortable. By morning, the mask had, quote, fused with his face. He touched his cheek, and felt no mask on it. What's going on? Okay. Transformation, part 5, transformation's complete. At work, everyone stares at him in awe. Manager calls him in, gazes at him for minutes, and then sends him back without a word passing. On his way home, he's preoccupied with this change in the attitude of his colleagues. He didn't pay attention to whether people avoided him. And of course they didn't. A matter of fact, a pretty woman stops him to ask for directions. And at work the next day, a, quote, beautiful woman with long legs and fierce lipstick asks him for what he's doing at lunch, but of course he misses the signal, okay? The finale is he no longer notices his own mask. He began to see the mask of others and, quote, saw it necessary to avoid them, and he crossed the street before it was too late. So there he is at the end, complete transformation. As I introduce I turn it over to Rabbi Moshe in a moment. Two things. One is that a mask in many cultures, as we know, Native American culture, in Brazilian culture, and during the Festival of Rio, during Native American dances, people do get dressed up, put masks on, have costumes, music, and they put themselves in trances, okay? So this is the background that this man, he comes from Nigeria, there are tribes in Nigeria, and he admits in an interview that this is part of what the mask represents to his culture, that by putting on the mask, this is very important, you can transform your personality. You leave and shed the personality that you had, and you take on the new persona of the mask, the features of the mask that you wear. And we know that in Native American cultures, they were eagle feathers, and so they turn into eagles who represent warriors, and so they turn into warriors to fight for battle, okay? And Mardi Gras down in New Orleans, again, this is people putting on masks to transform themselves, okay? So I want to leave that with you. The other thing I want to mention is this week's portion was Truma. We just read Truma, and it talks about creating an ark of acacia wood, okay? And it says, it says that you shall cover this ark, the ark, the Mishkan that you carry in the wilderness. It should be with pure pressed gold on the outside of the ark and pure pressed gold on the inside of the ark. Now, the rabbis have done a lot with this, but to me, it represents that whatever it is that's inside of you, okay, again, I'm talking a little mystical here, that whatever, that the ark represents gold is pure, that you should, the human personality, whether inward and outward, should be the same. Whoever you are, whoever you discover yourself to be inward, should be that person that you are outward. Now we know that's impossible.
Toho Kaboro.
Pardon?
Toho Kaboro.
Okay, I mean, this is a little Kabbalah, but it's the rabbis talk about it. I have a book with the Talmud in, and they speak about that. They speak about that, you know, Aaron sinned because of the golden calf. He took gold and he created a golden calf. So Aaron is the only one that's allowed to be inside the Mishkan. So that's emblematic of the way Aaron, anybody who is at a high position, should be. Whatever they are inside, they are close to God, they're close to divinity. That's the way they should act. Their behavior should reflect what's inside. Okay, now I relate that to the story in many different ways, but I leave it to you guys to come in, because I know Phyllis has a lot of ideas. I know Lori does, and I'm sure Rabbi Moshe has. So I turned it over to you guys, and I open it up because to me, there's so much I could speak about. I don't want to take any more time up, but if I had time, I would talk about David being the runt of the family, the outcast. No one even knew that he existed. He was a shepherd. And when Samuel comes to anoint the future king, he's not even there. I mean, he's somebody who's invisible. He's the invisible man. So I leave it and I turn it over to Rabbi Moshe to continue with this brilliant short story. Okay.
Thank you, Richard, for that wonderful summary. And, I couldn't have picked a better story to fit for the Purim theme, literally talking about masks. And I really appreciate your knowledge that you don't only know the classics of literature, but the fact that you still are learning, you're reading the New Yorker, and you're trying to find more contemporary literature that we can appreciate as well. So it's really quite a spread, a variety of different stories we've been doing. One thing is I want to actually give Phyllis a moment to jump in, because Phyllis was saying that there's the idea in Jewish ethics that we value when people are at one with the inside and what they show external on the outside as well. So for all the evil, for instance, that Joseph's brothers did by nearly killing him, but instead selling him into servitude in Egypt, they still get praised by the rabbis because they at very least were consistent. They didn't, despise him in their hearts, but meanwhile on the outside act as if everything was all right. They at least were honest, and they showed their unfortunate derision that they had. And while that may have been unfortunate, there's something to somebody being consistent, and that they show what they are on the outside the same way that they feel on the inside, like Phyllis was mentioning. So there is this idea on the one hand of the mask being on some ways a positive, but also a negative. So it could be a negative when someone's using it to conspire, someone's using it to hide. But what I found very interesting about this topic, I'll screen share in a moment, is a lot of this discussion here is about a person being true to himself. And oh, well, I shared the wrong screen over here. But when we think about falsehood, we think about deception, other than maybe wearing a mask on Purim, the sources that you see many times in the Bible, in Chazal, they talk about not lying, let's say in the context of judicial matters. So for instance, the verse in the Bible that tells us midvar sheker tirchag, you should distance yourself from falsehood, that's in the context, we saw this recently, mishpatim, not that many weeks ago, that it really revolves around judicial matters. And there are other psukim you'll see in Jeremiah, you'll see in Psalms that talk about how sheker, how deceit is undesirable, is condemned by God. And you'll see different literature over here. For instance, in Pirkei Avos, the ethics of our fathers, it says that the world stands on three things: al din, val emes, val shalom. Truth is one of the three things that we stand on. But if you look through much of the rabbinic literature, many times when it's telling us that we have to be true to each other, it's talking about in the context of interpersonal relationships. But what I find fascinating about this story is that it's not talking about the main character. We don't even get his name, right?
Correct.
Right. So that's interesting. We don't even get his name. Maybe the idea is, it could be anyone. We're all wearing masks.
He's every man. He's every man.
To a certain extent. We all wear a mask. So it's not just about being true to others, but about being true to ourselves. And this is really what we see this come up actually in the context of tshuva, of the repentance process, where when a person does teshuva, the question is, who am I returning to? So usually teshuva, to return or repent, we are returning to God. But I think Rav Kook and some others, they point out that teshuva actually is not just the process of returning to God, but it's the process of returning to our true selves as well. And I find that that's really much the message of this story and on Purim as well, that we recognize that sometimes we put on a front, we put on this veneer that we want to be viewed certain ways, but sometimes that might stunt us from showing what our true feelings are and our true consciences as well. So Phyllis, I think you were starting to talk about that. Did you want to elaborate on it at all?
No, I just said the Hebrew quote that I think that Richard was commenting on, Toho Kaboro.
Right,
Kaboro.
your inside's like your outside.
Yeah, but I don't know where that comes from. That quote. It must be Talmud or Mishnah from somewhere.
Yeah,
Now, Phyllis, what is the quote again?
Toho Kaboro.
Kabbalah.
Your inside and outside is
Outside should be in harmony. Yeah.
in other words, you shouldn't be two-faced. Is really referring to that you You shouldn't say one thing but believe something else. You should,
Very
be-
problematic.
it should be just like your inside. What you see, what you say to people should
What you
be.
see is what you get. What you
Yeah.
see is what you get. I mean, to have your actions in accordance with your beliefs and accordance with inside. Now, there are people that are evil, so their actions represent who they are. That's where we're talking about tshuva. That's where the tshuva process comes in, where you are constantly repeating your recidivist. You constantly repeat potentially criminal acts, and you're consistent. But that's not what I think this drash on the carefully. By the way, I prayed in what's called the Don Rickles Synagogue. Don Rickles being a famous Jewish comedian, grew up in Queens and Elmhurst, Jackson Heights, and he was bar mitzvahed at the shul there, the Jewish center, and he donated money to it. And there is an ark in his shul that is plated with metal inside and outside. Now, I don't think it is pure gold, but they try to represent, the Torah. I thought it was a beautiful experience, and knowing that here's this acerbic comedian, Hollywood comedian, that kept giving money every year until he died to keep that synagogue going, and it's still going right now. But how do you maintain this consistency? First of all, like Rabbi said, how do you find out what is really your true self? That's what I think this story is telling. And I want to throw this out to you guys, because I thought someone would certainly question, what does this? What? Pardon?
Give us a chance.
Okay, what I wanted to mention is very important. What might the main character's ethnicity have to do with the theme of the story? Let me repeat that.
That's what I was going to ask you. I was going to say.
Okay, I was waiting for Phyllis. So Phyllis,
well, you didn't give me a chance. The fact that he's black may be another issue that he's really talking about.
Okay,
black people are viewed differently sometimes, especially if it's at night and they're wearing certain clothing, or they appear in certain areas, and they could be very scary to some people.
It is scary, and particularly if you are a black person working in a white shoe advertising firm in London, unless it's an all-black firm, and they do exist, don't get me wrong. His ethnicity could very well pay a problem. And when the New Yorker interviewed him, you can go back to the New Yorker article, and they have an interview. That's the very first question that the interviewer asked him is, you avoid talking about one of the obvious questions of ethnicity. So how do you deal with it? And he said, well, a wrinkle in the realm. That's the title. So what does the wrinkle in the realm have to do with it? And this is what he said. He said, the story is called A Wrinkle in the Realm, which means something very small. And the realm is a great expanse, and a wrinkle is something very small. It's like a teardrop in the ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean, okay? He says, because in the universe where people respond irrationally to what they see, again, you can see a person, could be a person of the East Asian race, and they are being discriminated against horrifically. We have a friend in Greenwich. She has a Jewish mother and a Gentile father who converted, and she's afraid to go out because of her ethnicity, the way she looks. So in the universe where people respond irrationally to what they see, something has been glimpsed. The world is governed by perceptions that have greater force than laws, but they are illusions. The wrinkle, emphasize the wrinkle, is the momentary revelation of that illusion. So again, as I throw it out to you guys, you can make a mountain out of a molehill. You can look at your skin. You can look at a mole that you may have on your face, any type of aberration from the quote unquote majority, if you will, okay, and take it personally. And you can take it with great effrontery. You could be humiliated by the fact you could be the only black person in a firm that is white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And there are people that have done that. I'm thinking of people, broadcasting people. Jackie Robinson threw himself out years ago in the white man's sport, and he took so much abuse, but the guy is a hero. And in my estimation, this guy in the story is a hero because he's taking some type of an anomaly, some type of humiliation that he feels. It's all in his mind. It's in his mind. But yet he can't sleep at night. He can't sleep. He goes to work. He avoids people. He can't look at himself in the mirror anymore. But the mask, by putting on this mask, which has a transformative power of some sort, and one of the key, what I call the climax of the story is when the mask merchant tells him, I'm giving you this mask to solve your problem, but I want you to do one thing. You must imagine that this mask is your face. You must imagine that this is your mask, is your face. That's the ultimatum. And with that, he just accepted, in my opinion, he accepted who he was, okay? He accepted, I'm just happen to have different color skin, but it's a skin deep. I mean, it's what you have inside that tells people who you are. I mean, that's what, and we have our Tanakh is filled with so much transformation of people, whether it's Joseph in the dungeon, whether it's David in being a shepherd, a lonely shepherd with 6 brothers that tower over him, and Goliath, and being suddenly thrown into the realm of monarchy and kingship. These are incredible changes that happen, transform people. So you have to be prepared for change. And the change, like Rabbi says, begins with yourself. Really, how do I change? I know I got these problems. You got to go to somebody. You got to go to your own rabbi, your own shaman, he goes to a shaman here. In his culture, you put on masks and the mask transforms you magically. You do dances, you colorize your face, music, incense, smoke. I mean, you create this type of ritual and it transforms people. They get into a seance. And all the great people in our culture, great Moses and David, they were shepherds. They were and Joseph, they were shepherds. They were lonely people who discovered who they were in wilderness, and one-on-one with Hashem, if you will. I mean, that's what I think transformed them. And that's what everybody, I think the message of the story is, you want transformation, you got to work at it. And you have to first realize you have a problem. And this guy, his problem was overbearing. He was losing his job. He had, and in real life, this guy, Ben Okri, was homeless for many years. He lived out in the streets. You read his biography, incredible guy. He was homeless. So he knows what it means to become invisible. And I think if you're going to change your personality, you almost have to become invisible in a way to the person who you are. Put on a mask, conceal who you are, and make an effort to change. And this man did. He's a hero. It's a brilliant short story. It's probably the best I have ever read. And I've read The Lottery. I thought it was a great short story, no doubt about it. Those of you who are with us with The Lottery, great short story. The man who would bring rain, great short story. But this one, fantastic.
Thanks. I wanted to show, I got the source. There's 2 Gemaras I located that brought up the concept that Phyllis, Richard, both of you were discussing. So I just take a moment to share it on the screen. Let me just get the screen share going. So it's Gemara in Yevamos, I believe, that talks about Toho Kubaro. Sorry, Nyoma. So the Gemara here, this is actually very brief. It says, and this is a great connection. So this connects your initial opening, because I think you're talking about Parshas Truma, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So you see Exodus 25:11, I believe.
11,
Parshas Truma.
exactly. Yeah.
So it takes the verse which says, mibayis u'michutz titzapenu, that on the inside and the outside you shall put a covering on it. So Amarava, it says why on the inside and the outside. Kol Talmud Chacham Shein Tocho Kubaro, any scholar, any righteous person who is not, his inside and his outside do not match each other, he's not consistent, and he's presumably lacking some form of integrity, Eno Talmud Chacham, that person is not a Talmud Chacham, that person is not a scholar. So this is the concept that Phyllis, you mentioned, and I think it's somehow connected to Parshas Truma, which Richard, you opened up with. So I'm not sure if that's what we were both going for initially, but Hashgacha Pratis, you both were thinking in the same direction. The Gemara and Yoma made the connection for us.
Yeah, and there's one other connection in verse 11. V'asita alav zer zahav saviv. Now, that means, and you shall place above it a crown of around, encircle it with a crown of gold. So what's this crown of gold? The rabbis, in again the Talmud, I have a book which gets into these Talmudic explications, that the word zar has potentially two meanings. Zer meaning a crown, but zar meaning strange. Okay, so the rabbis take it to the next level, that this crown can go two ways. When you are acting outward like you are inwardly, you are really wearing the crown of Torah, okay? That's the highest level. Whereas if you do not, if you are hypocritical, if what you feel inside is different than what you are acting outside, you're Mr. Goody-Goody, but you've stolen your riches from the public, okay, inside, okay? You are an Isar, you're a stranger from God. You are Avodah Zarah, you can worship idols, and you're the outcast. And I think that was a beautiful drash on the second part of verse 11. Yeah.
Wow, beautiful.
Can I butt in for a moment?
By
Sure.
all means.
Okay, Lloyd here. I think there's an underlying secondary theme of this short story, where he says that he put his mask on and that transformed himself to an accepted person. But I feel that this is an evolution of people when they go through life, that you start out one way and you evolve into something else. And that's the mask that you're wearing at this time. And that's the acceptable one. And I believe that's a secondary theme for this.
Lloyd, excellent. I wasn't going to mention it, and I was waiting, and you did, and you mentioned it.
Let's say that again. Repeat that, please.
Lloyd, Phyllis is asking you to repeat it. Yeah.
Okay, it's a secondary theme to the story where you evolve into your transformative state. In other words, he wore a mask, he transformed himself. But I believe it's more evolutionary in time. We all change, we all are basis of our experiences, who defines who we are as we go through life.
Beautiful.
40 years ago, I was somebody different than I am today. And that's an evolution. And remember Barack Obama said his thinking about same-sex problems and marriages was evolving. And that's what brought that to mind.
That's beautiful. And the third obvious connection is the fact that we are wearing masks 90% of the time, should be 100% when we leave the home, but we are in a period of masks that we have to conceal ourselves from other people. And that's forcing us to have perhaps more genuine conversations with people on the phone, by Zoom, by telephone, and share what your isolation, where someone is or living in isolation, just like this main heroic character. He's isolated in London in the underground. He's living in the underground, if you will, and many of us, as a result of this this pandemic, we are living in a form of underground, a form of isolation from other people, and we can't. I teach at Greenwich High School, and I can't tell you how many of my students want to come up and hug me and get within a foot, and I have to push them away. And these beautiful young ladies and the guys, they want to congregate and hug and touch, and they can't do it.
They want to do that now?
I mean, they can't do it. I mean, that's why I'm there. I'm there to be a policeman in a way, is to enforce, strict 6 foot separation, and we're separated, but yet we come together. I think this Zoom thing will continue to grow, like Lloyd says, evolve. So more and more companies are going, like Spotify decided that it's going to go 100% Zoom. It's working out so well. People are becoming more active, more proactive at home. They're getting more done. They're not distracted at work, and they're not texting each other, emailing and flirting, whatever. And they're getting a lot done. So that their company is going full Zoom. And I think that could be the wave of the future, is unmasking ourselves. And once the mask comes off, we're happy talking to each other, remotely like this. Just a thought.
I have a question.
Only one?
Yeah. What's the business with the trees? What part does the trees play in this?
Well,
it says,
the tree is, I'm glad you raised, I didn't mention that. And I can only get to so much in my introduction. The tree, he says, they're like the only structure he can relate to. This poor isolated man
how can
loves walking down the street where the trees are lined on either side of him at different angles. And he says, quite frankly, he says, I look forward to, I don't want to have to move from those trees. So if a woman is coming in my direction, I just continue walking because I feel at home here. And meanwhile, they see him and they immediately cross to the other side. Okay.
But he says they're the only things in the world that were good to him. They never judged him.
Yeah. I mean,
what does that mean? What does that mean?
It means that in their inanimate way, they're not rejecting him. Humanity. What he's basically saying is that I am dehumanized. I'm like Gregory in Metamorphosis, that great short story by Kafka. I'm invisible. I'm a nobody. I'm a grasshopper. Okay, and the trees give them comfort. Some people love to surround themselves with beautiful trees at home, with beautiful plants. I mean, I've been in homes where the rooms, the kitchens, the living rooms, the bathrooms, it's so full of plants. People relate to them in some way. They say plant have a lot. They relate to each other and they relate to us. How we relate to plants is how they sometimes will grow in beautiful ways. And if we neglect them, as we know, give them too much water, whatever, they die on us. So I think what he's trying to say is it's the irony that the only solace that I have in my life is walking to work or working home under these beautiful trees that are my friends. It's ironic. It's ironic. It's pitiful. It's very sad. But here's a man that is at the end of tether. He's like, and Ralph Ellison wrote a book called The Invisible Man. It's one of the 200 best novels of the 20th century, a black man, Harlem Renaissance guy. And he writes, he's living in the underground. He writes the story from the point of view of a man living his whole life underground, okay? No light, and there are people during the COVID that are sequestered for 2 weeks. No light, no windows, no people contact. They're quarantined. That's what happens. And this guy in the story, that's his life. His life is sad, but the trees are my only friends. And at the end, what happens is that he realizes the other people are wearing masks and he avoids them because he can't relate to them. It's ironic in a way. It is ironic, but they accept him, and he's now realizing that other people have their own, shall we say, discrepancies between what's inside and outside. um,
You know,
disharmonies.
I was thinking something else. I was thinking, during these times, and it wasn't years ago. You never heard this word really being emphasized, but the word now is inclusiveness.
Yep.
That and I think this fits very well into this short story.
Yeah, I mean, inclusive capitalism is a very hot term right
Well,
now.
I wasn't thinking in those terms. I was thinking in terms of
But inclusive humanity is that, look,
people, yeah, who have deformities or have don't judge these people. They should be included. They're humans just like all of us.
exactly.
If they have a problem, they you don't shun them or refuse them work or not include them in your festivities or whatever.
I mean,
Like the friendship circle, what it stands for, and many other
yeah, I
organizations.
mean, those who are disadvantaged physically, mentally, uh, ethnically. I mean, there should be a East Asian recognition month. East Asians have contributed so much to this country, and yet we have a leader that called it the Chinese virus. Okay, he called it the Chinese poison, and that caused, you can't believe it, how many East Asian people are afraid to walk in the street. We have this dear friend. She will not leave her house in Greenwich because she looks East Asian. She's Jewish, East Asian. She is just frightened to go out.
Well,
And because of the slurs, the ethnic slurs that people have, we have to
I
start.
don't think it was meant as a slur. It was not meant to be a slur. It
Well,
was meant to be a point of geography and probably because of the head of government. It wasn't meant. It was not meant to
I
slur
agree,
individual
Phyllis.
people.
Rabbinically, we can argue four different sides of the question. We can rabbinically, there's a side to every issue. It's a side to every issue. I'm not going to get into politics because I don't think that's where we should be heading here. We should be thinking more in terms of self-development. That's what this is all about. This is a story of development so that you tolerate the other. And tolerate the other begins tolerating yourself first, accepting who you are. If you're not happy with who you are, then go see somebody, find your own mask maker, find somebody you can, a guide, a navi, somebody who can tell you how to change your life. I mean,
Oh, is the guy with the mask? Was he a psychiatrist?
I mean, he had a lot of insight, put it that way. The guy was in his culture. If you read the interview with the New Yorker, in his culture, people that sell masks and wear masks have, they're like prophets in a way. They're able to prophesize and they're able to change personality. People go to hypnotists. Hypnotism is a form of medical. It's in part of the medical profession. They go to get people, rid them of their obsessions, of various habits that they have to change, and it works under hypnosis. So that's what that shamanism or trance, getting into a trance, is a form of healing. And that's what the story is. He healed himself. Now he's turning the cards around and saying, now you heal yourself. I'm healing myself. You're accepting me and I'm happy with me. But now you got to change yourself in order so I don't cross in front of you on the street. I mean, it's a perfect, beautiful story. Beautiful.
Something that, oh, sorry, was someone else about to speak? Okay, so something I was thinking about is, on the one hand, we've been talking about how we value people being their true selves, but on the other hand, I think we would all agree, I mean, I don't know, maybe not, that whether we like it or not, everyone to a certain degree needs to wear a mask. Everyone to a certain degree needs to conform to societal norms. Otherwise, you become a cultural outcast. I'm not sure if that's what he's talking about. Maybe he didn't understand cultural nuances, but anyone who's just purely themselves and purely does what they want to do without taking in cues from society are usually viewed as outcasts or just I guess, socially impeded. So, one might want to consider what is the balance of, I think I think we'd all agree to a certain extent we have to respect some form of societal norms just to get by. But at what point do we say that's infringing on our ability to express our individuality? So I don't have a clear answer to that, but I'm wondering if other people see that kind of tension.
Yeah, I do. And the time to do that is Purim. That's the time for us to take off our masks.
It is. I mean, there's a time, the Jewish community is dealing with the issues of of lesbianism, of transgender issues. I mean, these are serious issues that have bedeviled in our congregation. And there's a tremendous tension. How do you deal with it? You have to deal with it in some way. You have to have counseling and like Phil says, inclusive. How do you include these people? Like the Chabad has done beautifully with the impaired, the emotionally, mentally impaired, and bringing them in with their friendship circle. We have to perhaps enlarge the circle to include other peoples that have been marginalized, afraid to come out, as you say. The people used to be in the closet. Now they're coming out in great numbers, and now we have to deal with that issue. We have various people that are going in political office that are now they're being accepted, even though they are gay. I mean, you have TV stars, Ellen, for instance, in the afternoon, Ellen DeGeneres. They're openly and they're accepted. So, in a way, we have to tolerate the other, and we have to tolerate the other. It's this Purim is a time for us to realize that we have to give serious thought and action to including other people in the conversation. They have to be part of the conversation. Can't exclude anybody.
Right. So we have a few minutes left. I'm just wondering, is there anyone else on with us now that hasn't had a chance to say anything that would like to ask a question, share a thought? I just want to, in the spirit of inclusion, I want to make sure we're being inclusive to everyone who's on the call with us.
Yeah, I have a thought about all this. I believe everybody wears a mask from time to time.
Uh-huh.
Hello.
Right.
Hi, Gloria. Hi, Gloria.
It's Gloria.
It's Gloria.
Hi, good to
I
hear you.
recognize that voice.
You know me, Richard. I was saying we all wear a mask, if not all the time, some of the time, and it depends upon how thick that mask is. Is it a thin layer of a mask, or is it something very deep, a mask that never leaves us? Then one has a problem. If it's just a mask from time to time and a thin mask, I think that thin mask is very beneficial. I'm not talking about the thicker mask, because sometimes people feel one way and they are masked, and because they're like that, they are able to contain it, and as the time goes by, or as the day goes by, or when it makes them feel hopefully better, and the mask is erased. So for those who have a real thick mask, yes, it's problematic. And otherwise, that's how it is. And I don't think there's anybody who doesn't have a mask on to some degree anytime.
Yeah, and
True.
what you're saying, Gloria, is so true. And going back to our short story, when he's trying on these masks, he's trying to find a mask which resembles the human face. If you read the story very carefully, he has 7 masks to choose from. Five, the ones that resemble the human face as close as possible. And that ties in with what you're saying. And at the end, when the mask fuses with his face, like it's so thin that whoever he was in a prior existence has been shed, is gone, melted, okay, and a new individual, Lloyd, he's evolved. He's a new individual is taken place, and he's accepting of who he is and who other people are. Although at the end, he's avoiding them too. But no, I think that's kind of a twist at the end. But that very, very well said, Gloria. I think you just hit on a great point. That the more that we can unpeel the layers that of mask around us that prevent us from really showing our true colors, our inside, who we are.
I think Gloria was getting to the point of Richard. You and I discussed a while back the minister's black veil.
Yes.
A more classic story by Nathaniel Hawthorne, and it's a very similar theme where the message is that everyone wears some form of a mask or a veil over them. There's no one who's, purely transparent. So,
Moshe wore a mask.
Oh, to cover the light.
Moshe put on the Masecha.
Yeah.
Masecha.
Oh, that's a good connection right there.
Because people couldn't stand they couldn't bear God's voice. It was like just too much for them.
Well, that's the reason you need the Ananim, the clouds, to prevent the Shekhinah from getting too close to people.
Okay, yeah.
There's that. But I want to share this story because you guys are all touching on it. But Deborah and I worked very closely with building the Jewish Historical Society archive. We went to a family home in New Canaan, and beautiful home on the lake. People were moving to Florida. They've lived in New Canaan for 25, 30 years. And for a while, they attended Aguda. The husband went to Aguda for a while. But the point being is that there were 14 Jewish families living in New Canaan, so to speak, undercover. They concealed their Judaism. They did not try to form a synagogue like Chabad now has a synagogue in New Canaan. But for years, they got together Friday night. They celebrated Shabbat. They had book clubs, they had book talks, they had teas, and they kept their Judaism undercover, so to speak. They didn't show their true faces for quite a while. And it only took Chabad maybe 10, 12 years ago. Chabad came in. Now Chabad has an actual facility, and they're able to have a minyan on Shabbat to make things happen. So, for a while, we live in a Christian culture, and the point is that we shouldn't, in my humble estimation, show ourselves too much, show off our wealth, in a way it was done in Vienna prior to World War II, with huge, beautiful downtown mansions, Fifth Avenue mansions, whatever. But you have to be low key. You got to be low key, otherwise, call attention to yourself at the wrong time, and the consequences. You live with the consequences. People get jealous, and you have to go underground again. You have to flee. You got to flee the Nazis. You got to live in barns and live in attics. And I mean, that's the story of our people, having to constantly flee. And never feel too comfortable in any environment either. I think that's another story. Don't feel too comfortable, because in a second it could be gone. It comes quickly and it can go very quickly.
All important lessons. Yasher Koach, Richard, thank you so much for selecting the story, explaining the story. And I want to thank everyone who's with us today. I want to thank Phyllis, Lori, Gloria, Charles, and those who were with us earlier for contributing to the discussion and coming to listen and learn together. Wishing everyone a Freilich and Purim, and God willing, Richard and I will be in touch to figure out our next story. And we'll let you guys know what we'll be doing for March as soon as we know.
Yep.
All right. Have a Freilich and Purim.
Happy Purim, everybody. Happy
Thank
Purim
you.
and good Shabbos. And Shabbat Shalom.
Everybody, same.
Thank you for coming,
Yes.
everybody. Thank you.